The night was unusually cold. The deserted highway in northern England, with snow-covered forests stretching along both sides, was drowned in a dead silence. The wind whistled eerily, as if some unknown force was wandering through the emptiness. David Harper, an experienced truck driver, was slowly driving his heavy vehicle forward. He had been doing this job for the past 15 years. Long roads, lonely nights, and dangerous weather, all of it had become a part of his life. But tonight, something was different. David pulled his jacket tighter around himself and reached toward the heater. "This cold is strange," he muttered to himself. Even inside the truck, an unusual chill was spreading, as if the cold wasn't just outside, but seeping in from within. He turned on the radio, but there was only static. SHHHHHH. Great, David muttered in frustration and turned it off. It was around 2 a.m. The highway was completely empty. No cars, no people, just David and his truck. And then, his eyes caught something ahead on the road. Something was there. A shadow. David narrowed his eyes. What is that? Amid the white snow, on the side of the road, stood a human figure. A woman, wearing a long coat, her head lowered, hair scattered across her face. She wasn't moving at all. David's heart began to pound. What is she doing here at this hour? He slowed down. Questions flooded his mind. Was she a traveler? Did she need help? Or something else? The truck approached her. David honked. Honk. But the woman didn't move. David tightened his grip on the steering wheel. This isn't normal. Now she was very close. For a brief moment, David tried to see her face. But he couldn't. Only dark hair. And an unnatural silence. A strange fear began to grow inside him. The kind of fear that comes without reason. A voice inside whispered, "Don't stop the truck." But then his humanity spoke. What if she needs help? He pressed the brakes. The truck came to a slow stop. A few moments of silence passed. Then, the woman slowly began to walk toward the truck. Her footsteps made no sound. It was as if she was gliding over the snow. David's throat went dry. He opened the door and looked down. "Hello, are you okay?" The woman didn't respond. She just kept coming closer. And then, she stopped right beside the truck. Gathering his courage, David asked, "Do you need a ride somewhere?" Silence. Then, slowly, the woman lifted her face. And David's blood froze. Her face was not human. Her eyes were completely black, as if darkness filled them entirely. Her skin was unnaturally pale, and her lips were blue. She smiled. A smile no human could ever have. "I need a ride." Her voice was deep and rough, like two voices speaking at once. David's mind screamed, "No," but his lips betrayed him. "Oh, okay, get in." The woman slowly climbed into the truck. The door shut, and at that exact moment, the temperature inside the truck dropped suddenly. David started driving again. But now, he was not alone. For a few moments, there was complete silence. Then the woman spoke. "You come here often?" David replied nervously. "Yes, for work." She let out a soft laugh. "You shouldn't have come." David felt a chill run through him. "What do you mean?" She turned toward him. Her black eyes seemed to pierce straight into his soul. "This road is not for the living." At that very moment, the truck's lights began to flicker. And on the road ahead, something else appeared. Another shadow, then another, then many. In the middle of the road, it wasn't just that woman anymore. There were dozens of shadows. David slammed the brakes. The truck screeched to a halt. "What is this?" he shouted. The woman slowly leaned closer to his ear and whispered, "They were all waiting for me." At that moment, the truck's engine died. The lights went out completely. And outside, the shadows slowly began to surround the truck. David's breathing grew heavy. He was not alone anymore. And now, there was nowhere left to go. David Harper's hands tightened around the steering wheel. It felt as if the blood in his body had begun to slow down. Outside the truck, the shadows stood silently, slowly moving closer, as if following some unseen command. There was no sound among them, no footsteps, no breathing. Only movement, living yet lifeless movement. For a moment, David closed his eyes and opened them again, hoping it was all an illusion. But no, The shadows were even closer now. They left no footprints in the snow, as if they weren't touching the ground at all. The woman sitting beside him was silent, but her presence now felt heavier than before. Who are they? David's voice trembled. The woman didn't answer immediately. She kept staring straight ahead, as if she already knew everything. Then, slowly, her lips moved. They are the ones who once passed through here and never made it back. David's heart sank. What do you mean? Without looking at him, she said, This road is not a path. It's a doorway. A cold wave ran through David's body. He immediately tried to start the truck, but the engine gave no response, just a dry, lifeless sound, and then silence. Come on, he muttered desperately. But the truck felt dead. Outside, the shadows were now right next to the truck. Their shapes were becoming clearer. Some looked human, some were twisted, as if deformed by accidents, and others didn't even resemble anything human at all. David's breathing grew rapid. He looked through the window and saw one shadow standing directly in front of him. Its face was blurred, but where the eyes should have been, there was only a deep black void. Suddenly, thud! Someone knocked on the truck door. David flinched. Thud, thud, thud. The knocking continued. His heart felt like it would burst out his chest. Open the door. A faint, broken voice came from outside. David shook his head. No. But the woman beside him smiled faintly. They always knock because they need permission to come inside. David quickly checked the door lock. It was secured, but still, he felt like it wouldn't hold for long. What if I don't open it? He asked, gathering what little courage he had. The woman slowly turned to look at him. The darkness in her eyes seemed even deeper now. Then they will wait until you give in. At that moment, a loud noise came from the back of the truck. Bang! As if something had crashed into it. David panicked and looked into the rear-view mirror, but there was only darkness. Nothing visible, yet he was certain something was there. They're not just outside, the woman said softly. They can come inside too. David's mind went numb. Who are you? He asked, his voice shaking. There was silence for a few moments. Then the woman slowly turned toward him. I was once like you. David's eyes widened. A driver? She nodded. Yes, years ago, on a cold night, I gave someone a ride too. A shock ran through David's body. And then, a painful smile appeared on her lips. And then, I never reached my destination. At that very moment, the shadows outside suddenly began to move together, as if they had received a signal. Thud, 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 thud. Now multiple knocks echoed at once from all sides of the truck. The vehicle began to shake. They're going to get inside, David shouted. The woman slowly lowered her head and whispered, They already have. David immediately turned around, and a scream tore out of him. In the darkness at the back of the truck, two black eyes were glowing. David's scream echoed inside the closed cabin of the truck. His eyes were fixed on the back, where in the darkness those two black eyes glowed like burning coals. His body felt numb. He couldn't look forward, nor could he tear his gaze away from behind. After a few moments, those eyes began to move slowly, as if something was emerging from the darkness into the light. David's throat went dry. His lips trembled. What is that? The woman sitting beside him gave no answer. She remained silent, as if all of this was completely normal to her. The black eyes came closer. Slowly, a faint shape began to form. First a head, then shoulders, then the whole body. It was a man, or at least it must have once been a man. His body was twisted and broken, as if crushed in a horrific accident. His clothes were torn, and his face had no clear features, only those black, hollow eyes. He slowly crawled forward inside the truck. David's breath began to fail. No, don't come near me. But the thing did not stop. It dragged itself closer, until it reached right behind David's seat. Now it was so close that David could feel its cold breath on the back of his neck. His entire body shook uncontrollably. Then, near his ear, a whisper came. You will come with us too. David shut his eyes tightly and screamed, Go away! With that scream, he suddenly turned the key, and astonishingly, the truck started. The engine roared to life. Outside, the shadows stepped back for a moment. David seized the chance and slammed his foot on the accelerator. The truck lurched forward, but that thing was still inside. David fixed his eyes on the road, driving with all his strength despite his trembling hands. "I have to get out. I have to get out," he kept repeating to himself. The woman beside him was still silent. Her face was eerily calm, as if none of this affected her at all. "This won't end," she said softly. Shaken with fear and anger, David snapped, "Shut up." But deep inside, her words echoed. "This won't end." Suddenly, the temperature inside the truck dropped even further. His breath turned into visible mist. And then, in the rearview mirror, David saw, the thing was now sitting right behind him. Its face was clearer now, and it was smiling, a twisted, inhuman smile. Panicking, David jerked the steering wheel. The truck swerved violently. The tires began to slip on the icy road. "Stay in control, stay in control," he tried to steady himself, but his eyes kept darting back to the mirror. The thing was still staring at him. Then suddenly, it vanished. David looked back in shock. Nothing, just darkness and emptiness. He had barely begun to breathe in relief when the woman beside him burst into loud laughter. That laughter was not human. "You think you escaped?" she said. At that very moment, David realized something. The thing wasn't behind him anymore. It was now right beside him. Slowly, David turned his head, and a scream tore out of him. That same distorted face, those same black eyes, now inches away from his own. "We won't let you go." The truck went out of control. The steering wheel slipped from his hands. The vehicle skidded off the road toward the edge. And then, a deafening crash. Everything was swallowed by darkness. After the crash, complete silence took over. A silence so deep, it rang inside the ears. David Harper felt as if he had sunk into a vast darkness, where there was no sense of time, no awareness of his body, only an unnamed cold that had seeped deep into his bones. Then, slowly, he realized he was breathing. He was alive. With great effort, he opened his eyes. Everything in front of him was blurred. The front of the truck was completely wrecked. The windshield was shattered, and snow had pushed its way. Inside, David tried to move, but a sharp wave of pain shot through his body. A groan escaped his lips. And then suddenly, everything came rushing back. The woman, the shadows, that creature. He tried to sit upright in a panic. Where are they? He looked around. There was no one inside the truck now. Not the woman, not the creature, not even a shadow. Only silence. And cold. David's heart began to pound. Was it all a dream? But then his eyes fell on the truck door. It was half open, and on it, there were scratch marks pulled inward, as if someone hadn't tried to open it from outside, but from inside. A chill ran down David's spine. Slowly, he stepped out of the truck. Outside, the scene was even more terrifying. A vast field of snow stretched endlessly. The road was nowhere in sight, as if the truck had crashed far off course. The wind had grown stronger, and sharp flakes of snow stung his face. David scanned his surroundings. No people, no sound. But then, he saw something. Footprints in the snow. They led away from the truck. David's heart pounded harder. "These aren't mine." The prints looked small like bare feet. He stood there for a moment. A battle raged inside him. Should he go or not? But then, slowly, he began to follow them. With every step, the cold intensified. The wind howled louder, and the silence grew deeper. After walking some distance, he suddenly stopped. In front of him, there was a shallow pit in the snow, and inside it, something was buried. David's heart thudded in his chest. He knelt down and began brushing the snow away with his hands. As the snow cleared, a shape began to appear. First the hair, then the face. David's hands froze. It was the body of a woman. Her face was pale, her lips blue, and her eyes completely black. A jolt ran through David's body. This is her. The same woman, the one he had given a ride to. He stumbled backward. His mind had gone numb. But how is this possible? At that very moment, a voice came from behind him. "Because I never left." David's heart stopped. Slowly, he turned around, and there she was. standing in the snow, without leaving a single footprint. Her eyes were darker than before, and on her lips was that same unnatural smile. "I was always here," she said. David staggered back. What are you?" She slowly stepped closer. "I'm the path and the end." Suddenly, a strange sound began to rise from beneath the ground, as if something was moving, as if something was awakening. David looked down. Beneath the snow, shadows were shifting, as if dozens of bodies were trying to come back to life. A scream tore out of him. He stepped back, but slipped and fell to the ground. At that moment, the snow began to crack open, and hands, black, lifeless hands, started emerging from beneath it. They reached toward him. The woman said softly, "Now you are one of us." David tried with all his strength to get up, but a hand grabbed his ankle. He screamed, "Let me go!" But it was too late. The shadows began pulling him down, and the woman just stood there silently watching. David Harper used all his strength, but those black, icy hands had already locked onto his ankles. Their grip was freezing, yet unnaturally powerful, as if some dark force still breathed within those lifeless forms. He was being dragged across the ground. "No, no!" His voice scattered into the freezing wind. He tried to grab the ground with both hands, but the snow kept slipping beneath his fingers. With every passing second, he was being pulled closer to those shadowy hands, dragging him down into the darkness. At that moment, a sudden flash crossed his mind. A memory. Years ago, an old driver named Arthur had met him at a roadside stop. He had said, "Some roads aren't just paths, son, they're trials. If you ever feel like you're not alone, don't save the vehicle, save yourself. Run toward the light, don't fight the darkness." A spark lit in David's eyes. The light. He quickly lifted his head and looked around. Darkness everywhere, snow, and those shadows. But then, far in the distance, a faint light appeared, like a lamp, or maybe a road signal. A new strength suddenly awakened within David. "I have to reach it." He twisted his body with all his might. The hands were still pulling him, but with a sudden jerk, he slipped his shoe off. The grip loosened. This was his chance. David immediately got up and began stumbling toward the light. Behind him, the shadows started screaming. A strange, horrifying scream, as if they didn't want to let him go. The wind grew stronger. Snow stung his eyes, but David didn't stop. He kept running, focused only on the light. Suddenly, the woman appeared in front of him, as if she could materialize from anywhere. "You cannot leave." Her voice was deeper and more terrifying than before. David stopped, gasping for breath. "Get out of my way," she smiled. "No one leaves this place." At that very moment, the shadows began rising behind him again. For a brief second, David closed his eyes. Then he gathered all his courage and ran straight toward the woman. She seemed startled for a moment, and just as he reached her, he shoved her with all his strength. A piercing scream echoed through the air. Her body began to dissolve into mist, as if she had never truly been real. David passed right through. Now the light was very close. He kept running, and then, suddenly, everything changed. The wind stopped. The screams fell silent, and that light was now just a street lamp, a normal road. David collapsed to his knees. His breathing was uncontrollable. He turned back. That snowy field, those shadows, that woman, nothing was there. Only a deserted highway. Tears filled David's eyes. I made it. But, did he really? At that moment, a familiar voice came from behind him. "You came back after all." David's heart stopped. Slowly, he turned around. And there, by the side of the road, the same woman stood again. This time, dozens of shadows stood behind her, and all of them were smiling. David Harper's feet felt frozen to the ground. In front of him stood the same woman, and behind her, the same shadows, now clearer, closer, more real than ever. For a moment, he thought maybe he had never truly escaped that nightmare. Maybe it wasn't over at all. This isn't possible." The words barely escaped his lips. The woman slowly stepped toward him. Her footsteps made no sound, yet with every step, The air grew colder. You thought you survived? Her voice was calm, eerily calm, like death itself. David tried to step back, but his legs refused to move. I'm leaving this place, he said, trying to steady himself, though there was no conviction in his voice. The woman stopped and gave a faint smile. You may leave, but you cannot take yourself with you. The words pierced straight into his heart. David immediately looked down at himself, and his breath stopped. His clothes were torn, his body covered in frost, and his hands, they were slowly turning transparent. What is happening to me? He shouted in panic. The woman slowly raised her hand and pointed toward the side of the road. Look, with trembling fear, David turned his gaze in that direction, and what he saw shattered his entire world. Below the road, near the edge of a ditch, a wrecked truck lay crushed, and inside it, a body was trapped, covered in blood, motionless. It was him. David's eyes widened in horror. No, this can't be me. But the truth was undeniable. The crash had been far worse than he realized. He had died in that very moment. He only thought he had escaped, but he never did. His knees gave out. He collapsed to the ground. No, I don't want to stay here. The woman stepped closer. Now her face still held that cold smile, but there was a faint sadness within it. We all said the same thing, she whispered. David looked up at her. Is there no way out? Silence lingered for a few moments. Then she spoke. There is always a way, but there is always a price. A faint spark of hope appeared in David's eyes. What price? She leaned in close and whispered, You must bring someone else to take your place. The color drained from David's face. No, I can't do that. The woman straightened and stepped back. Then you will stay here forever. At that moment, the shadows behind her began to move. Slowly, they started approaching David. He turned once more toward the light, which now seemed very far away. Inside his mind, a final battle began. To escape, or to be lost forever. Then, he slowly lowered his head. Time passed. Days later, on that same road, another truck was passing by. A new driver, a new traveler, a new night. The snow fell just the same. The wind screamed just the same. And by the roadside, a man stood, in torn clothes, head lowered. As the truck approached, he slowly lifted his head, his eyes completely black, and on his lips a cold smile. I need a ride. It was David Harper. Now he too had become a part of that road, and this cycle never ends. The end? Or perhaps not.